Hey everyone, Sky here to discuss Stardust, starring Charlie Cox, Claire Danes, Robert De Niro, Sienna Miller, Michelle Pfeiffer, Ian McKellen, Ricky Gervais, Jason Fleming, Peter O'Toole, and Rupert Everett, and directed by Matthew Vaughn. And before I get into this movie, I did see it in theaters, but I don't remember it very well. But the other thing I didn't know when I saw this in theaters is that it was a DC comic book. And it's not a superhero, but it's more like fairy tale or what do you call it? Fantasy. But overall, I don't remember being. Let's get into it. A narration by Ian McKellen is what I need for a Lord of the Rings epic type of comic book. Not. We meet Dunstan Thorn, who passes a wall to go to a Stormfold, where he meets Una, who happens to be a bird, as she gives him a flower in trade for a kiss, and she reveals she's a slave for a witch when she's a princess, and they have a baby that named Dunstan that Dunstan has to take care of, named Tristan. Excuse me very much. Who in 18 years later will be played by Charlie Cox from the Daredevil Netflix series, as he tries to fall in love with Victoria, played by Sienna Miller, when she's sort of taken by Humphrey, played by Superman himself, Henry Cavill, before he was ever Superman, let's say. And Tristan wants to have Victoria, and she walks her home and loses his job over it, which doesn't make any sense because you can't leave your job to walk someone home. And Victoria comes off like a bitch in this movie. Excuse my French. As she has to be with Humphrey, who's going to propose to Victoria on her birthday, which is in another week. And Tristan and Victoria have a picnic, excuse me, while she tells him about Humphrey's proposal. And all of this corny is and not good enough like in The Lord of the Rings. I'm having a really hard time connecting with Tristan as well as his arc, which is not any better as far as Victoria is concerned. The king, played by Peter O'Toole, dies in his sleep, which I think is rather a worthless scene in this. And this movie is a little too long. Tristan tries to get a star for Victoria's hand, and I get the impression Victoria doesn't like him because she seems irritated by seeing him, which makes me blame Sienna Miller's acting more than the script. As Tristan goes after the star, we move on Lamia, played by Michelle Pfeiffer, who comes off wicked here, which is a pretty good acting by Michelle Pfeiffer and typical of her. But when she acts with her sisters in Pusa or something like that, I don't know if I said that name right, or Marmo, then the movie begins to sour in my mouth as they look older at first, but gets power to look like a little more younger, which is rather silly and distasteful in my opinion. We meet the star girl Yvain, played by Claire Danes, as she's trapped on her star by being chained up, and Tristan gets a letter by her father as he tried to get through the wall, but he gets his ass kicked by the gatekeeper. Tristan gets transported to the star's location. He meets Yvain, takes her prisoner, and as a proposal to Victoria. And it really doesn't make any sense as I'm thinking, is this supposed to be romantic? Because I believe that's an odd and terrible way to propose to a woman. To give a gift of the star that happens to be also be a woman, which sounds like a bad romance movie. And remind me, what is everyone's grief on that star? And exactly why should I care at this point? I'm 35 minutes into this movie and I'm getting to the plot, and I'm not getting the plot as an epic movie, as the plot makes no sense. There's a subplot with Septimus, played by Mark Strong, trying to get the star in order to be the next king. I get that one, which God help me through this damn movie. Yvain finds a unicorn that sets her free. Meanwhile, Lamia finds the location of the star, But no star as her sisters kill a crocodile to give her more power so she can make two goats that transported her that transported her within her into a man and a young man looking like a woman transforming, I'll say, and which makes me very uncomfortable to play with body shifts, like in Terminator 3 when the Terminatrix shifts her boobs around, for example. Oh, God, I don't want to think about that ever again. Tristan tries to find Yvain before she gets killed, and he gets on a wagon, and Yvain gets to a house, which happens to be Lamia, with two others in it, which made me think she's in danger. Get the hell out of there. And can I and I can't help but notice seeing that Yvain goes in the bed, she's glowing, which is a bad effect, and this movie's special effects look awful. I can't stand it. Can't kind of like Lamia doesn't change the voices of two goats, and the fact Septimus's brother has blue blood. What is he, some kind of monster? Lamia attacks Tristan and Yvain after they're reunited and are almost killed, and we get a pirate ship in the sky led by Captain Shakespeare, played by Robert De Niro. And I personally think he's wasted by this material, and I felt bad for him in this movie. Tristan and Yvain are trapped on the pirate ship as they talk about to each other and start liking each other, which I guess was earned at this point, but I'm not going to let it slide at this point. In this movie, as she tells him he's buying her love, which sounds rather an epic movie cliche. Captain Shakespeare interrogates them as he fakes throwing Tristan out the window and takes Yvain to another room on the ship and gives them clothes, gratitude, and gives Tristan a haircut. And do I have to say this again? De Niro is wasted in this movie. They give some energy power to Ferdy the Fence, played by Ricky Gervais, who's an asshole here, as he's an asshole in real life. Excuse my French once again, as I'm not a fan of Ricky Gervais and his character, and is preposterous, and I hated every minute with Ricky Gervais on screen, for that matter. Moving on. Captain Shakespeare gives lessons to both Tristan and Yvain on sword fights versus piano and dance lessons. And unfortunately, I'm not impressed with these scenes nor the characters, as this is bad acting. And remind me, why is Claire Danes glowing like a star as she's happy? That effect, again, looked awful. Captain Shakespeare drops off Tristan and Yvain while Lamia interrogates Ferdy as she turns his voice into a goat? No, chicken? I couldn't tell you. And Septimus killing him off, and good riddance as the character was getting on my nerves. Septimus gets on Captain Shakespeare's ship as he's dancing wearing women's clothes, which has got to be the stupidest moment in the film, as Septimus is torturing Captain Shakespeare, and his pirates attack him, and Septimus escapes. And I'm almost really angry at this film at this point because it's going on too long. Again, cut some of this out. Tristan and Yvain bump into Sal, who was Tristan's mother, who holds Tristan's mother throughout the movie. And how do I know that his mother is nearby? How do they not know that his mother's nearby? As she recognizes the flower. As Sal turns Tristan into a mouse, as she gives Tristan and Yvain a ride, while he was a mouse. Yvain tells Tristan she loves him as they arrive to a town. Sal turns Tristan into a human again as they get shelter, as this movie is getting very irritating at this point. I don't know if I want to watch anymore, but I have to continue for the show, I'm afraid. Tristan collects a piece of Yvain's hair and goes back to Victoria after she tells him she loves him, which is a very poor excuse for a character being Prince Charming, as he decides to go back to Yvain and dumps Victoria for Humphrey to get married to her. Yvain gets to the wall, and so does Lamia, and Una warns Yvain she'll die if she goes through the wall, and Yvain and Una with Lamia in a carriage go with her, Lamia in the carriage, and they arrive rather quickly with Tristan falling behind, and same goes for Septimus. They get this they get the star chained up as Tristan and Septimus arrive, and they barge in as Tristan meets Una as his mother, and a witch dies by Septimus' sword, and Lamia uses him as a puppet to break his joints, making him float, die, and join the underworld with his brothers, which is the stupidest way to die in a fantasy epic. Una runs outside as Tristan fights another witch, and he uses animals to kill her off, which was odd, and all that's left is Lamia. Tristan puts lightning towards Lamia, and she uses Septimus as her weapon and of choice. And Tristan knocks the puppet down, and Tristan and Lamia fights and lets them both go, just like that, which didn't make any freaking sense. A lot of this movie doesn't make any sense. Lamia traps Tristan and Yvain and breaks the glass from her powers, and Yvain advises Tristan to close her eyes as she glows absolutely bright that it makes Lamia blow up. And now I'm starting to see why she glows, but earlier it was so frustrating that I can't make sense of it. Tristan becomes a king with Yvain as our queen, and the climax just. I was glad to be done with this movie as I was frustrated throughout the movie. Now it's time for the rating. I'll give this movie a 2.0 out of 10. I was very frustrated with this film. I can't make I can't even make sense of it at all. The characters were bland as hell. The writing is so freaking horrible, and the acting in this was so bad. But hell, this whole movie was so bad. It's a shame that Matthew Vaughn directed this thing, as this may be his weakest film yet to date. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me, and until we get to maybe the Kingsman, let's say, for another series, look at the stars.